Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Gray Matthews had anticipated the familiar, mundane lectures of senior year psychology, but today, the atmosphere shifted in an instant. Professor Bennett loomed at the room's apex. Her form became colossal, casting a long shadow over the lecture hall. With a swift motion, she released the shackles of academic protocol, resulting in an ominous thud that reverberated through the now hushed chamber. A collective gasp arose from the bewildered crowd as their initial anticipation transmuted into sheer terror. "Norms!" Professor Bennett's profound voice boomed, her demeanor eerily calm amidst the chaos. "Are the elusive threads spun into society's constrictive web. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to unravel a solitary thread, observe, and reflect on the aftermath." Amidst the ensuing hysteria, Gray appeared unaffected as he languished in his seat. His fingers brushed through his brown hair, unruly from the sheer exhaustion of anticipating the revered title of a senior. "I expect genuine discomfort, genuine learning. This isn't about silly pranks. This is about understanding how social expectations shape our identities and behaviors." Back at the apartment, Gray's roommate Devin looked up from his laptop as Gray tossed his backpack onto the couch. "You look like someone stole your coffee," Devin remarked, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Bennett's social psychology project. We have to break a social norm in a significant way, and then present on it." Gray collapsed into the armchair across from him. "And everyone's doing the same boring stuff." Devin closed his laptop. "So, do something actually challenging." "Like what? Walk backwards all day? Speak only in questions?" "No." Devin leaned forward, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Do something that actually makes you confront real social expectations. Something that would make you genuinely uncomfortable." "Such as?" "Crossdress." The word hung in the air between them. Gray started to laugh, then realized Devin wasn't joking. "You can't be serious." "Deadly serious. Think about it. Gender norms are the most pervasive social expectations we have. People literally organize their entire identities around them. Breaking that norm would give you legitimate psychological insights." Gray shook his head. "I wouldn't even know where to begin." "My sister Elaine is about your size. She left some clothes here last time she visited." Devin was already walking toward his bedroom. "And YouTube has makeup tutorials for literally everything." "I didn't agree to this!" Devin poked his head back around the corner. "Do you want an A or not?" 3 days later, Gray stared at himself in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the person staring back. Devin's sister had indeed left behind a conservative navy blue skirt suit that fit surprisingly well, though the jacket strained slightly across his shoulders. The beige pumps pinched his toes, but he'd practiced walking in them enough that he wasn't going to fall flat on his face. The face looking back at him was different, not overly done, but transformed. Devin had convinced his girlfriend Monica to help with the makeup, and she'd kept it subtle, foundation to smooth his skin, mascara to lengthen his lashes, a touch of pink lipstick. Most surprising was what Monica had done with his hair. She'd pinned back the sides of his brown hair, added some temporary extensions that matched his color perfectly, and styled it into soft waves that framed his face. "You need a name," Monica had said, head tilted as she assessed her work. "You can't be Gray today." "Hadley," he'd responded without thinking, the name of a character from a story he'd written in high school. Now, Hadley stared back at him from the mirror. Devin knocked on the bathroom door. "Car's waiting. Ready for day 1, Hadley?" The campus walkway stretched before him like an endless runway. Gray had never been more aware of his body, how his hips moved, how his shoulders were set, how his eyes kept wanting to dart down at the ground instead of looking ahead. "Remember what we practiced," Devin murmured beside him. "Smaller steps. Let your hips sway naturally. And for God's sake, stop looking terrified."
"Easy for you to say,"
Gray hissed back.
"You're not the one in heels."
A group of students walked past, deep in conversation. Gray tensed, waiting for the double takes, the finger pointing, the barely concealed laughter. Nothing happened. They passed without a glance. The realization struck him with surprising force. They saw a woman in a conservative business suit walking to class. Nothing remarkable about that. "Told you," Devin said with a grin. "The clothes, the walk, the hair, the makeup, it's a package deal. People see what they expect to see." Gray had 3 classes that day: advanced statistics at 10 a.m., literary theory at noon, and an elective on film history at 2 p.m. He'd chosen this day specifically because it didn't include psychology. He wasn't ready to face Professor Bennett yet. In statistics, he slid into a seat in the back row, heart pounding. The professor nodded absently as students filtered in, never looking twice at him. The girl who sat next to him even smiled and complimented the navy blue suit. "Job interview later?" she asked. Gray nodded, not trusting his voice. By lunch, something strange had happened. The constant tension that had gripped him all morning began to unwind. No one had recognized him. No one had questioned his presence. The world hadn't stopped turning because Gray Matthews was wearing a skirt. Sitting in the campus cafe, carefully eating a salad — Monica had warned him about getting lipstick on everything — he found himself observing the social dynamics around him with new eyes. How women sat differently, how they occupied space differently, how they interacted with each other versus how they interacted with men. For his film history class, he almost felt comfortable. The beige pumps still hurt, but he'd learned to manage them. The jacket still felt tight across his shoulders, but he'd adjusted the way he moved to accommodate it. When the professor asked for his thoughts on the French New Wave, he even spoke up, his voice soft but clear. Walking back to the apartment that afternoon, Devin couldn't stop grinning. "You did it," he said, clapping Gray on the shoulder. "How do you feel?" Gray considered the question seriously.
"Like I learned something, but also like I've only scratched the surface."
That night, after removing the makeup and changing back into his jeans and t-shirt, Gray opened his laptop and began typing notes for his presentation. One day, as Hadley had yielded insights, but he knew it wasn't enough for the kind of psychological analysis Professor Bennett would expect. He needed to go deeper. The next morning, Gray stood in Devin's sister's bedroom at her apartment across town, surveying the options Elaine had laid out on her bed. "The suit was a good start," she said, arms crossed as she assessed him critically. "But too conservative, too safe. You're trying to break social norms, right? Let's push the boundaries a bit." She held up a floral midi dress with a pattern of tiny blue and purple flowers against a cream background. "This with the denim jacket would be perfect for a day on campus." Gray swallowed hard. "Isn't that a bit obvious?" Elaine laughed. "That's the point, isn't it? Besides, dresses are actually easier than separates when you're starting out. One piece, done." An hour later, Hadley emerged from Elaine's apartment in the floral dress, denim jacket, and a pair of simple ballet flats that were infinitely more comfortable than the previous day's pumps. Her brown hair was styled in the same soft waves, but Elaine had added a small braid that wrapped around like a headband. The campus felt different this time. Perhaps it was the more relaxed outfit. Perhaps it was having survived one day already, but Gray found himself standing straighter, walking with more confidence. The gentle sway of the dress against his legs was strange, but not unpleasant. Something else was different too. People noticed her, not with suspicion or mockery, but with the normal attention a woman in a pretty dress might receive. A guy held the door open at the library. Another student smiled at her in the coffee line. For his psychology presentation the following week, Gray knew he needed to make a statement. The assignment required them to present their findings to the class, to explain what social norm they had challenged and what they had learned from the experience.
You need something professional but bold,
Monica insisted, scrolling through photos on her phone as they sat in the campus coffee shop. Something that says you're taking this seriously. Which was how, 1 week after his first day as Hadley, Gray found himself walking into Professor Bennett's psychology class wearing a burgundy sheath dress under a matching blazer. His brown hair was styled in loose waves, and the low-heeled black pumps he wore clicked confidently against the floor as he entered. The classroom fell silent. Professor Bennett looked up from her notes, eyebrows rising above her glasses. For a moment, Gray thought he'd made a terrible mistake. Then, a slow smile spread across her face. "Mr. Matthews, I presume?" she said, gesturing to the front of the room. "I believe you're our first presenter today." Standing before his classmates, Gray felt a strange calm settle over him. He'd prepared thoroughly, organizing his observations and research into a comprehensive analysis of gender as a social construct, the psychological implications of presentation, and the ways society reinforces gender norms through subtle and not-so-subtle pressures. "For my project on challenging social norms," he began, his voice steady, "I chose to examine gender presentation and its impact on social interaction and self-perception." The presentation was a success. His classmates asked thoughtful questions, engaged with his observations, treated the entire experiment with the academic seriousness it deserved. Professor Bennett's expression remained inscrutable, but Gray caught her nodding several times during his analysis. When class ended, she asked him to stay behind. "That was quite the commitment to the assignment, Mr. Matthews," she said, gathering her papers. Gray smoothed the burgundy dress nervously. "Thank you, Professor. May I ask why you chose this particular norm to challenge?" He considered the question carefully. "I wanted something that would genuinely push me out of my comfort zone. Something that would force me to confront assumptions I didn't even know I was making." Professor Bennett nodded slowly. "And what was the most surprising thing you learned?" Gray hadn't included this in his presentation. It felt too personal, too complex to distill into an academic point. But standing there in the empty classroom, the burgundy dress smooth against his skin, he found himself answering honestly. "That the discomfort wasn't what I expected. I was prepared for embarrassment, for mockery, for feeling like I was wearing a costume. But the real discomfort came from realizing how many rules I've been following without ever questioning them, how many choices I've never considered making." Professor Bennett smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed her usual stern demeanor. "That, Mr. Matthews, is exactly the point of the exercise. Well done." The assignment was over. Gray had earned his A. By all rights, he should have boxed up the clothes, thanked Monica and Elaine for their help, and returned to his regular life. Instead, the following Saturday found him at the mall with Elaine, examining a display of sweaters in a store he'd walked past 100 times but never entered. "The pastel blue would look amazing with your coloring," Elaine said, holding it up against his chest. "And it would pair perfectly with that pleated skirt we saw earlier." Gray fingered the soft material, remembering how the burgundy dress had felt, how the floral midi had swayed, how different his body had seemed in the navy blue suit. "I'm not sure what I'm doing," he admitted quietly. Elaine put the sweater back on the rack and looked at him seriously. "Do you need to know right now? Can't you just explore and see where it leads?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Gray thought about the notes he'd taken for his psychology presentation, about the freedom he'd felt walking across campus as Hadley, about the strange rightness of seeing himself transformed in the mirror. "I'm not ready to label it," he said finally. "But I'd like to try the blue sweater. And maybe that cream one, too." They left the mall with 2 shopping bags filled with carefully chosen pieces, the blue and cream sweaters, the pleated skirt in a soft gray, a simple black dress that could be dressed up or down, and a pair of comfortable flats in a warm cognac color. Back at his apartment, Gray hung each item carefully in his closet, separating them slightly from his existing wardrobe. Devin watched from the doorway, expression neutral.
"So, this is continuing past the assignment?"
he asked. Gray nodded, running his fingers over the soft material of the blue sweater.
"Just sometimes. On weekends, maybe. I'm figuring it out." "As Gray or as Hadley?" The question made him pause. Who was Hadley? Really? A costume for an assignment? An experiment? Or something else? Something that had been waiting quietly to be discovered? Both, I think. For now. The next weekend, Hadley walked through the downtown arts district, brown hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders, the pleated gray skirt swishing gently with each step. The blue sweater brought out unexpected highlights in her eyes, and the cognac flats were blissfully comfortable for an afternoon of gallery browsing. No assignment, no presentation, no academic justification. Just Hadley, exploring a part of herself that Gray was only beginning to understand. In a small boutique between galleries, she found herself examining a display of delicate necklaces. The shopkeeper, a woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, approached with a smile. "The amber pendant would complement your coloring beautifully," she suggested, indicating a small, honey-colored stone set in simple silver. Hadley touched it gently. "It's lovely!" "Would you like to try it on?" A nod, and then the shopkeeper was fastening it around her neck, the pendant resting just at the hollow of her throat. In the mirror, the effect was subtle but transformative. It completed the outfit, added a touch of warmth to her complexion. "Perfect," the shopkeeper declared. "It looks like it was made for you." Hadley studied her reflection, seeing the integration of all the pieces, the sweater, the skirt, the shoes, the pendant, the styling of her brown hair. Not a costume, not an experiment, just her. "I'll take it," she said, and the words felt like a declaration of something much larger. Winter settled over the campus, bringing with it the end of the semester and the beginning of something new in Gray's life. The careful separation in his closet had gradually disappeared, his wardrobe becoming an integrated collection that reflected both aspects of himself. Some days were Gray days, jeans and hoodies, his brown hair unstyled, moving through the world in the familiar shape he'd always known. Other days,
increasingly frequent, were Hadley days. A wool skirt and tights against the December chill. A soft sweater dress with boots. Always the amber pendant, which had become something of a signature. Professor Bennett stopped him after the final exam, her eyes noting the subtle mascara and lip tint he'd begun wearing regardless of how he was dressed otherwise. "Your social norms project," she said, handing him his graded final paper. "It seems to have had a lasting impact." Gray accepted the paper, noting the A+ scrawled at the top. "It helped me recognize something I think I've always known." The professor nodded thoughtfully. "That's the truest kind of education. Not learning something new, but finally seeing what was already there." Spring semester began with subtle shifts. Gray legally changed the spelling of his name to Gray, a small adjustment that felt significant. He grew his brown hair longer, no longer needing the extensions for Hadley days. The definitions between his two presentations grew less distinct, with elements of each bleeding into the other until they were no longer separate identities, but aspects of a single, integrated self. By March, Gray was having a conversation with his academic advisor about his future plans, his amber pendant catching the light as he leaned forward in the chair. "I've been thinking about graduate programs in psychology," Gray said, wearing slim-cut trousers and a soft sweater that could be read as either masculine or feminine. "Specifically gender studies and identity formation." His advisor smiled. "Based on your recent work, I'd say you have valuable personal insights to bring to the field." 1 year after the assignment that had changed everything, Gray sat in the campus coffee shop with Devin, reminiscing. The pleated skirt from that first shopping trip had been paired with a simple button-down shirt, an outfit that felt precisely right for who Gray had become. "Did you ever imagine this is where that psychology project would lead?" Devin asked, stirring his coffee. Gray touched the amber pendant that rarely left her neck these days. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, a style that worked regardless of how she chose to present on any given day. "I think part of me always knew," she replied. "The assignment just gave me permission to discover it." Outside the coffee shop window, Professor Bennett walked past. She caught Gray's eye through the glass and gave a small, knowing nod. Acknowledgement of a journey that had started in her classroom, but had always been destined to continue far beyond it. Gray nodded back, feeling the gentle weight of the pendant against her skin, the soft fabric of the skirt against her legs, the integrated sense of self that had emerged from what had begun as a simple classroom assignment. Some social norms, once broken, reveal paths to authenticity that can never be closed again. And sometimes, what seems like an academic exercise becomes the key that unlocks a door you never knew was waiting to be opened. That evening, Gray stood before the mirror in her bedroom, the wardrobe behind her no longer divided, no longer representing two separate selves, but a single person who had found the courage to become whole. Her brown hair fell in soft waves around her face, her own hair now, grown out over the months, cared for, and styled with growing expertise. The amber pendant gleamed at her throat, a constant reminder of that first confident choice made not for an assignment, but for herself. Tomorrow she would begin her final semester at the university. Graduation loomed on the horizon, and beyond it, a graduate program that had accepted her application with enthusiasm, recognizing the unique perspective she would bring to the field. The journey that had begun with a navy blue skirt suit and beige pumps had evolved into something profound. Not just a challenging of social norms, but a discovery of truth. Not just an academic exercise, but a path to becoming. "Hadley," she whispered to her reflection. The name no longer a character or a disguise, but an integral part of who she had always been meant to be. Then, with equal certainty, Gray. 2 names for one person, 2 expressions of a single self. The boundaries between them had dissolved, leaving behind something authentic and integrated that no assignment could have predicted, but that, perhaps, had been waiting all along to be discovered. Outside her window, the first stars of evening appeared in the darkening sky, bearing witness to a transformation that was not an ending, but a beginning. Not just the conclusion of a psychology project, but the opening chapter of a life finally being lived in full.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!